Well, welcome everybody to Recovery Live, the Came to Believe Recovery's weekly live stream where we talk about everything addiction and solutions and everything all around it. My name is Tom. I'm a recovered alcoholic addict. Back from a week off last week while I was halfway around the world in Greece doing some kind of mission work with an organization. I want to welcome my co-host Alicea Martinez from California.
Hello. Good morning for me. Good afternoon to you.
That's true. Morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon who's where you are when you're viewing us. We know we have viewers from halfway around the world, pretty much, usually, right? UK, all the way from California to and everywhere in between.
Exactly.
Right. What do we have? Got a couple updates, I guess. The retreat in St. Anthony's in the Bronx, guys, is coming up. Our second one, Alicia's coming out for that, and so is Dale Barker and Dara, and Dale Marsh is coming, where we actually go in and live in the shelter with these people, guys, with these gentlemen, and we take them through the program as we present at our retreats, and that's coming up in 3 weeks. So we're all starting to gear up and get excited for that. We had such great reaction from the last time that we went that it's really exciting to go back a second time where they're even more motivated because they kind of know what we're going to do. So some of the restrictions that the friars had on, it's a Franciscan shelter in the South Bronx, they do not have on this time. So they're going to allow like people from the neighborhood and anybody come in that's suffering from some sort of addiction and brokenness that wants to hear the message. So we're excited about that, right? Alicia's coming. She's going to make the big trip on an airplane. She doesn't like it.
It's all right. It's okay. I rather go, and I think it's set up that way, rather fly early morning than at night. So I think I leave early in the morning and get to East Coast in the afternoon.
Yeah, you're going to go fly down to LA and meet Dara on her plane.
Okay.
And awesome. You guys will be on the same plane. And then we're looking to do one in the Manhattan in Kips Bay, which will be a brand new one. Then we'll be in Malibu and Schooley's Mountain, New Jersey, and we'll be in Leesburg,
Nevada
and then in Nevada City in the fall. So things are really going to be picking up. Alicia and I are also going into Missouri here in a few weeks to talk to some people in the recovery world and do a master class on what we do and see if it interests them to have us come in and help them do it.
There's Sue, Dale, and Tim.
Yeah. Hello, guys. Sue Foreman. So we have North Carolina, Christmas, Florida, and Tim, where are you? He's Orlando, I think, Florida.
But Sue's usually in Florida, right?
She is, but she's in North Carolina. Yeah, that's strange, too, because the summer's not usually when they go there. They usually go there in the winter, but must be some reason that the Foremans are in North Carolina. I just did get back from Greece. I'm still trying to put myself together, Alicia. I'm not really
the time zone would kill me, I think.
Yeah.
The time change stuff.
It's worse than I thought. I mean, it's a topic for another show, but I did find some very eye-opening things in Greece with the people. One thing of their very little knowledge of AA as an organization, very little. They do not have big books. They didn't even know what the big books were. So we were showing them big books and trying to tell them the history of AA. They didn't even know what it was. Very, very superficial idea at all. And they have no big books. So we're helping them get them in Greek. So at least they have big books. But I had thought anywhere in the world which had telephones and TVs, and the internet, over the last 50 years, there was a knowledge of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not a new thing, right? I was quite shocked at the lack. There's 4 meetings in all of Athens. So that shows you how little. I mean, it's probably, nobody knew about it. So what an opportunity, though, to go and kind of share something at such a grassroots level that they aren't.
Exactly. That could be a good thing, actually.
Yeah. But we weren't ready for that. We pivoted, and pivoting is going to be a big subject today quickly because we were able to and changed how we were teaching because we didn't have that information before we went. they're wonderful communicators, the Greek, and that's very sarcastic. They're terrible communicators.
Oh, because of the language barrier?
No, because they just don't answer emails. I don't know. They don't follow the answer
Well,
your
maybe it
email every
was
24
staff
hours.
organization or something.
Guys, Alicea will make an excuse for everybody. So, you know,
If
no matter what they do.
you know about the Enneagram, some hate it, some love it, whatever. I'm a 9.
Unless it comes to food or exercise,
Right.
she'll make an
But I am
excuse
a
for
9.
you.
So I am the middle ground for anything and everybody. I will find both sides good, both sides bad, overanalyze everything. That's just me. So yeah.
So this is how every conversation goes, mostly when you get on with Alicea. She says, what? I have a question.
I have 20 questions about
I have 20 questions.
everything.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sometimes it's exhausting, but generally it's not. Anyway, today, so that's what's going on, guys. We have a not so busy summer, which is usual, and then a really busy fall as we come out to just bring our message to those that want to hear it, and those that it fits for. They come and hear what we're doing. We're going to be in New York City in the Bronx. I'm going to be working with City Relief and doing some with the homeless, and those of us that live in the New York area. Alicea and I will probably be doing some things in the Bay Area, also with the shelters that we have relationships with. So we're all out there doing a bunch of stuff. And actually, we're looking for a grant to help us do it with some shelters in the Orlando area. That's something we're working on for later in the year. So lots of stuff going on. But as anybody that's watched our show at all knows, we want to explore all pathways for people to that they use for recovery from addiction or from life or from brokenness or from whatever it is that has them not in the place where they want to be or think they should be in life. And we love to talk to organizations and people and movements and things that are going on in every category, because it's just better for all of us to know. So with that being said, we would love to bring on Matt Nannis from PIVOTPoint WNC to talk about exactly what this organization does, which is very cool. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're at. I appreciate the opportunity. And I just wanted to throw it out there that maybe these folks aren't terrible at communicating. Maybe they just don't have that Western society gumption, got to get stuff done type thing.
Oh, he might
I'm
be
particularly impatient, so I'm just throwing it out there that maybe I'm projecting on you, Tom, that you share my impatience.
Yeah, you and Alicea get along because you made an excuse for them. Because Sarah loves it in the background.
We're just seeing their point of view, right? We have to put
Yeah,
ourselves in their shoes sometimes.
Well, it's certainly the Western thing that they don't adhere to. But here's the problem: when we do and they don't,
I get it. I also think that money doesn't exist, but the problem is that everybody that I owe it to thinks that it does.
Well, I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is I got to use that. Can I use that, Matt?
Yeah, it's yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
No private ownership.
That's awesome. Well, that is one of the things that you learn as you travel the world, how people do things different than Americans, and we don't have the right way to do it. We have a way to do it, right? We work all the time. We are driven crazy. We do nothing, and they have some peace and rest. They may have it right, actually.
Possible.
Yeah, possible. Who knows, right? So, Matt, tell us. We want to have guys. We were having a great discussion before we came on, as we often do before these shows, because we get into the subject of whatever we're talking about, and Cass was on with us.
Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. We're gonna bring it out right now. Don't worry.
Bring it back. Don't worry. So we're going to just keep it going, but we do want to start with, some of you are going PIVOTPoint WNC. What's that? You haven't had a chance. You may know nothing at all about it. So we do want to give Matt a chance to give us a 30,000 foot on what is PIVOTPoint WNC and how to get started.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, on the top left corner of my screen, there's a duck with a headset on. I think it's a duck. And next to it says connect. It says connect and heal. And one of the two main taglines and approaches that we have as an organization are pretty much that, but with an important addition, which is get outside, connect, heal, right? And the whole concept of PIVOTPoint WNC is to explore and utilize the natural environment, the external landscape, as a access point to explore and lean into and cultivate compassion with the internal landscape, right? So we are a therapeutic adventure company. We do day programs, hiking, paddleboarding, rock climbing, mountain biking, whitewater rafting. I have a set of snowshoes. We've only used them once since 2017 because we are in the mountains of North Carolina. And we use those activities for like deep dive intensive group facilitation. We take individuals out for 4 to 6 hours at a time, and we work on kind of core value identification. We work on interpersonal communication skills. We work on self-regulation skills, how to calm ourselves down, emotional intelligence and awareness, so that instead of being reactive and driven by an emotion like anger, I can maybe take a half step back and just identify that I'm experiencing anger, and therefore can separate from that and not allow that to dictate to the way that I interact with the people around me. The other tagline that we have that kind of sums up our approach is transformation through relationship. And we do that by modeling healthy, pro-social, unconditional positive regard from our facilitators with the groups that we take out, and encourage and strategize on ways to cultivate that with our clients, with the groups that we're taking out. We take up to 10 people out into the woods at a time. We work with the Department of Juvenile Justice here in town. We work with adult diversion programming, which, if you ask, I'm happy to explain to the degree that I understand it, what that looks like here in Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is located. And then we also offer essentially an experiential intensive outpatient alternative that we've created. It took us about 2 years to put together a curriculum that can serve as either an alternative to going back to a primary care program for not only substance use disorder, but also, mental health and behavioral health challenges. I know, Tom, you mentioned a couple of times that this isn't necessarily about drugs and alcohol. This is about healing. This is about growth. Mm-hmm. And that everybody's recovery journey. I spent a long time assuming that if you said recovery journey, then you were talking about getting drunk and high, and no longer doing that. And it's occurred to me in the last, certainly at least 5 years, as I continue to grow myself and become a little more open-minded and kind of break down some of the rigidity that my brain likes to hold on to, that, healing is healing, and illness is illness. And there are different particulars depending on what those diagnoses look like. But, and I hope we can get to this in our discussion, but we'll see how it plays out. I think it can be real challenging to get caught up in the words. And by that, I mean, in my experience, just my personal experience with Alcoholics Anonymous and the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have worked with individuals and young men who have bucked against the words in the book. And one of the most consistent things I've ever told them is, don't let the words in this book get in the way of you of recovering. Like, these are the words that I think are fundamental to the foundation of my growth and my sobriety. And, it's a combination, or it's a navigation away from intellectualizing, right? Like, utilize, don't analyze, right? So let's get this information in, and then let's start taking action steps. And similarly with the work that we do at PIVOTPoint, I think a lot of the folks that we get to work with have been pathologized for a lot of their lives. And it's easy to identify with a diagnosis as opposed to identify as a human being. And I'll just kind of wrap it up with that. One of the things that we were talking about before this show started was that ultimately, at the end of the day, PIVOTPoint WNC is here to amplify access to our work. We are a nonprofit. try and, raise funds to remove financial barriers. And our focus is giving everybody just a permission to be human again, remembering, returning to, it's not about having our experience. It's about helping you identify and engage in your experience.
Wow. Thanks, Matt. I mean, so many things. I was trying to make notes to ask questions. What did you call that? What the counselors do? Something regard
pathologizing?
No, you give them positive something regard.
Unconditional positive regard.
Unconditional positive regard. Yeah. You got to write that down. I love that.
The challenge.
And I would agree with you that the growth, many times for me too, all my growth and transformation came after I got over the substances. It was not as there was substance afterwards. That's when the path started for me. As we do here, we call it working 10, 11, and 12, or living in the go. It's action. It's not a one-off thing that we show, or these guys did back in AA. I'd be really interested in, you're talking about the words in the book and what issues with some of the words in the book. We may get to that because I think it's important for those that.
I'm wondering what words you're referring to or what that could be. Is that what you mean, Tom?
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
So we'll probably get to that, but let me ask just some logistical questions. Like when people go, do they go out for 6 weeks and not come back? Is it like camping for 6 weeks?
No, it's we're really clear on this being day programming. So if you're in our 6-week program, then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to go out with us for about 6 hours a day, and then you're going to be living in a supportive housing, substance-free residential environment when you're not with us. Right. So this is the reason that we structured and deliver our 6-week program the way that we do is to provide a supportive and structured environment in a condensed amount of time, right? It's just 6 weeks, where a lot of these programs tend to be considerably longer. But everything that we're doing in the woods essentially is theoretical. It really is. I mean, we're talking about clinical theories, we're talking about behavior change models and theories, and we're relating it to our personal experience. And we're still in the woods with two wilderness first responder or first aid credentialed facilitators, one of whom is a licensed clinician, and outdoor leadership experience. And we're there with the intention and the kind of the protected container of talking about growth and healing and how to apply these skills to our lives. But without the opportunity to actually apply these skills to our lives, what are we doing? Right? Like it's similar. Like I think it's real easy to stay sober for 60 minutes in the basement of a church because it's a glorified book club until I bring it out into the world. So similarly with this program, we're going to review everything. We're going to go over these skills and strategies and behavior patterns. And then you go home to the supportive housing environment, which is essentially like a sober dorm, right? And practice this stuff. Right. Because it's in the practice and the doing, and frankly, in the failing, in these things not going to plan, that we get more usable data. And then we can start, instead of relying on theory, we can start relying on the proof of your experience.
That sounds like talk we do, doesn't it, Alicea?
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Because we are going to fail and we're going to make mistakes. And it sounds like, like on Monday, if they're with you, they're like, yeah, this is great. And then you get into the real world and someone cuts you off or your husband pisses you off and you're like, this sucks. So we have to learn what was that tool that Matt taught me, and let me practice it. And I didn't like that. And it's, that's so needed. And to understand that that's okay.
Yeah.
Fall. I don't like fail, but fall, get back up.
Yeah. Fail's a tough word. It's a tough word. It implies that there's a right way. And we were talking about that before too. It implies that there's a definitive right way to do it, and that it applies to all of us. And I've done some talks somewhat similar to this, and some of the podcasts I've been on are talking about like success being subjective, and like let's take a pause, let's take a beat. Who are we doing this for? And that's why we start with core value identification. Like, to each of the folks in the woods with us, like, what drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And if nothing gets you out of the bed in the morning, why are you here? You know, and if you're at least willing to be curious about that, then I think that's enough of an access point for us to begin a healthy conversation. You know,
I think, Matt, I'm sure that many of us are, I don't know, corralled or are stifled in who we are in our identity by society and by how we're raised and how we go to school and what we're expected to do, and the freedom to be who you're really supposed to be and the permission to do it. We don't get that in our lives very much. Maybe today, like, I woke up, I was raised and I didn't have a choice. At some point I had to go to work because electricity, you got to have electricity, and I can't produce it myself. So we have to pay for it. So you have to do these kind of things. To take somebody to a proposition, it's a lot of what we do too, Matt, is give them this opportunity to start asking questions and a permission to explore who they are and what's not working, and fix it and make it work through a process. It's just, but if you don't know what's not working in your life, if you haven't identified it and decided that you want to make the pivot, we were talking about that before too, which is you can be at that point, but if you don't take this pivot, if you don't make the move, nothing changes. So many of us in this world that I meet are on these paths that they had only so much input, or felt like they only had so much input for. I don't know if that makes any sense to you guys.
It does to me. I mean, I think that's why we talk about having experience. And I think and I've been like more or less, I mean, it wasn't accosted. That's not fair to use that term, but I've been approached like very enthusiastically at like a Trader Joe's parking lot. Cause it used to say on the side of our first vehicle, it had our logo, and underneath it would say have an experience. And someone would just hollered as they were coming out of the Trader Joe's, "What kind of an experience?" And I forgot that it was written on the side of the vehicle. So I had no idea they were talking to me. I thought it was just somebody having an activated conversation. And I look up, and gentleman's much closer to me at this point. "What kind of an experience?" And I had no idea what the heck he was talking about. And then I closed the door and I see the logo. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, your experience, just engaging your experience. Be aware of what's happening. Stop writing a narrative around it. Stop comparing it to what it was supposed to be or what surely there. Just tap in. And if I may, I'll bring up some of the stuff that I may have used some interesting words when I was talking about the words in the book. Like I know at the top of page 47, so we're in We Agnostics at the top of page 47, and we're talking about conceptions of a higher power, and it says something, and I hate quoting the book because I can't do it, but it says something along the lines of like, as we talk about spiritual terms, don't hesitate to ask yourself what these prejudices really mean to you. And I can pull out a book and read it verbatim, which would probably be more effective, but that's what I'm talking about, is like, as I go through the process and provide and come across a design for living that works in all affairs, right? Steps that will solve all my problems. I think it is easy, and it's just been my experience, my own experience. So that's why I think it's easy. I think it's easy to get caught up on particular words that I assign preconceived notions to, condemnation prior to investigation, right? And I think not necessarily around the concepts of a higher power, but I think that there are elements in that book, as I have witnessed taking other gentlemen through the steps, and as I reflect on my own process being taken through the steps, that it's easy to kind of like, I'm going to dig my heels in, and I'm going to buck against this word choice, and I'm going to buck against what I think this means to me, right? And then fortunately, thank God for sponsorship, I have someone who gives me a dictionary and shares their experience with it. And because of a degree of open-mindedness, willingness, I'm able to entertain your conception and your experience, because it's hard for me to counter or discredit your experience because it's yours. But that's sort of what I was getting at when I spoke about like, and it's not that I have issue with any of the words in the book. I think that it is easy to get distracted and focus intellectually on the words that are in the book, on the program of recovery outlined in the textbook that is Alcoholics Anonymous, and allow that to stifle my action steps, to actually get involved in working the steps as opposed to reading about the steps. I don't know if that's clear.
It totally makes sense. I mean, it's a battle we fight, Matt, is how they're interpreting and how these things are read to face value. It actually, I happen to have the book sitting right here.
I thought that you might.
Surprisingly enough. And it does say, when therefore we speak to you of God, capital G, we mean your own conception of God, capital G. Now, here we usually stop, not your own concept, your own conception is what they're talking about. So they're assuming that you have some conception of a supreme being, higher power. It's not about asking you to decide that it's a light bulb. It's not what they meant there. If that, just for anybody that is thinking. This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Deprogramming people from religious experience and things that they've seen is one of our big things that we try to do, is to allow them to say, don't take what you've been told about it if it hasn't been working for you and it hasn't made sense to you. And it's a place to start and then see where it goes. It's a starting point. So I love that you brought that up. Wow. We're doing big book stuff that we didn't know we were going to do today. Thanks.
You thought I was going to talk about hiking and paddleboarding.
Hiking, paddle. We want to talk about hiking and paddleboarding, but this is what's good about this, is that what we're really talking about is how we're going to get to healing and transformation and how things can work together. And that through getting together like you do or coming to one of our retreats, it's all about taking those action steps. It's all about figuring out what to do and then just starting doing it and taking shots, making that turn. So I have 3 questions. Let's get back to a little bit. We could go on forever. I have a feeling you're going to be on again with us if you're willing, because this is already really great. And it's really great, I think, for everyone to hear this conversation that we're having, because it's questions that everybody asks, Matt.
Sure.
And to hear us all talking about it as, you know, I don't know, the guys on the screens, you know, I dare not say expert, but we're the ones on the screens.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have the FaceTime. That's all.
Right. Who comes? Who's the typical participant in a PIVOTPoint programs? Who's your primary participant?
Yeah, so it's we began this program focused exclusively on folks who were either at risk of like a formalized substance use disorder diagnosis from a medical profession or a clinical profession. And either at risk or on the other end, right? Like we're not a primary care program. We're not a crisis intervention program. We are either a preventative intervention or a transitional, condensed transitional program to help provide that environment for you to practice this stuff, just practice skills and get more information when they don't go to plan, because they're never going to go to plan. And even if they do go to plan and you repeat steps 1 through 10, you're probably still not going to get the same outcome that the last time that you did 1 through 10 and you got the outcome that you wanted. So it originally was substance use specific. We have since noticed since 2017 that there's really no need to prioritize for us. There's no need for us to prioritize substance use addiction, problematic relationships with drugs and alcohol, because either there's mental health and behavioral health challenges, anxiety, depression, general overwhelm, inability to engage in social settings. Either that is coupled with a no longer effective relationship to drugs and alcohol, or it isn't. We have found that if we start talking about the individual, and again, going back to what are your core values first, it has been a rare occurrence that somebody who's engaged in a hike or an outing with us doesn't have some kind of less than ideal relationship to drugs and alcohol. But it's not something that is a prerequisite or like a rule out, right? So within the context of that, we're talking about, and I'm going to use more clinical-ish terms, so low to moderate acuity. So not extreme degrees of mental health and behavioral health challenges, right? Because we're going into the woods. We've got wilderness first responders and wilderness first aid and sat phones and all the risk management and safety protocols and trainings. And it is of our opinion and approach that if somebody has like psychosis or a dissociative diagnosis and is maybe on medications and they're not quite stabilized yet, that in those instances, being 3 miles into the woods is perhaps not the most effective and safe environment, right? And we're also asking our participants to get to what I articulate as the thing under the thing under the thing, right? So it's sort of like the difference. And here's another recovery-based analogy, right? I think it's the difference of going through the 4-step as mapped out in the big book versus going through the 4-step maybe a few years later as mapped out in the 12 and 12. I think, and that's just, again, my own experience with those two books and those two processes as they're mapped out, I think that there is a super effective process as it's mapped out in the big book, going through the columns. And that was my experience. And to then, similar to, writing it once versus writing it with 16 years of recovery experience under their belts, to then go through the 4-step and the inventory, the way in which it's mapped out, a little more narrative focused to me in the 12 and 12, revealed additional underlying behavior patterns that I just couldn't get to my first or second time around. So similarly, not using in any way any 12-step abstinence-based literature at all, because we're not an AA program. We're not a 12-step abstinence-based program. To be honest, I don't know that we've ever claimed to be in alignment with anything, but I think on paper, harm reduction would be the most accurate thing to look at, right? Like if you're living at that halfway house and you're going in our 6-week program, I need to know if you failed a drug test, not because I got to call your sponsor, but because I can't put you on a mountain bike. This is just not safe, right? So you're not kicked out of my program if you return to use. And I would say, and do say to people that I read the big book with, if they call eventually with some, what they perceive or project to be guilt or shame about the fact that they had a return to use. And maybe this will spark a fun conversation with the two of you. I'm of the opinion that you've got 6 months, 9 months, 6 weeks, a year and a half of active, engaged in the program sober time, coming off of 15, 20 years of active addiction. To me, it makes a hell of a lot more sense that you would wake up in the morning and get drunk or stoned than that you would wake up in the morning, sit quietly for 5 minutes, pray and meditate, and then go about your day trying to be of maximum service to the people about you. I think that for me is where the miracle is. That I can sit here and talk about any of this stuff, independent of what book it comes out of, and have enough self-awareness that, I got to make sure that I drink, 32 ounces of water every day, is phenomenal to me. Like, what a gift. Because and Tom, you mentioned this earlier, without the drugs and alcohol, and it talks about this in the book that we're talking about, I'm still left with me in active alcoholism. I'm just left with my disease without coping skills that stopped working for me years and years before I stopped actually engaging in it.
The steps only talk about alcohol like once. They talk about a transformational process that we start to live. And yeah, it's interesting that 4-step over and over again. We would say you do a 4-step once and then it's a 10th step after that.
Sure.
But it's still a process that you're growing. We want to teach somebody the process of figuring out the bad things. And then when you find a new one, you just overlay the same process over it and keep growing. It's a 10-step process.
Because I busted my hump to get current with the world, with a power greater than myself and with the people about me. why would I allow, because I'm inherently lazy, why would I allow that stuff to fester and build up to the point where I have to do another 4-step? Because 4-step's a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting, when I can stay current with 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also find that if I'm engaging in that book with a new individual, one of the most beautiful parts of going through the steps with someone, whether I'm the one going through the steps or I'm helping somebody else navigate that process as a result of the experience I have with it, is we get to know each other. And that's such a beautiful thing, especially from the amount of hesitation I especially came into this program with, allowing anybody, including myself, to get to know me. I didn't want you to know a damn thing about me, or the hell out of me, right? But like, it's just this beautiful opportunity. I think when you strip it down, I'm going to read the book with somebody who's already read the book with somebody who's already read the book. And as a result of that beautiful simplicity, I'm going to get to know somebody else a lot better. I'm going to then trust them enough to get to know myself a lot better. And then if I can look at my patterns, trust God, clean house, help others, I then shift into a position to be able to grow in effectiveness and understanding to everybody around me. And then that's where that bright spot comes from.
And this could be a rabbit hole that we get into, is interpretations of the big book. Bill Wilson left it too wide open. This whole idea of people say, what about taking another 4th step? I ask them to show me in the book where it says to ever take another 4th step. There's no instruction on taking a 4th step over and over again. You're supposed to do the 12 steps. And if it does to you what it did to them, you should be living 10, 11, and 12 the rest of your life. Not that you don't have more stuff to come about and you're not working through things and growing. It's just in a 10, 11, and 12 process, which we find and have learned, when you can be done with that 1 through 9 process, it's a much more positive outlook on life. I'm not always climbing out of the hole, Matt. I'm not always recovering. I've got it now. And I'm not perfect, but I got a program I can work every day and keep growing and growing. And people get a different attitude in their recovery with that. And we do see people turn in a weekend from 30 years of drinking and drugging to getting up in the morning and praying and meditating and going on their day.
It's a beautiful
Not
thing.
everybody, but it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the outcomes? So those, you're like you said, you're not focused on those specifically substance use people to come. That's not your like target audience, but does it tend to be the people that come?
There's always a relationship. Thus far, there's always been. And if it's not necessarily, so I can't say always. So there was an individual somewhat recently that had process addictions. So it was around like technology and screen time. Same behavior patterns.
Sure.
Just a different ingredient to the same thing. And I mean, what are our outcomes? We do pre and post kind of Likert scale, right? Like I agree, disagree on a scale of 1 to 5 type assessments, right. And they're all self-assessments. We're talking to a couple of professors at Texas A&M to provide a lot more substantial and clinically viable and informative research that we can start including, especially with the teenagers that we work with. But we set out goals for a reduction in recidivism because we work with juvenile justice kids. So court-involved youth, as a result of engaging in a 10 to 13 week, once a week program, slightly different because these kids are in high school at the time that they're engaged in our program. So we take them out 10 or 13 Saturdays in a row. There are some outcomes that the state and the county have anticipations for because they're county contracts, right? So they're trying to make sure that these programs are effective. And that is a reduction in recidivism, a reduction in truancy at their school, a reduction or complete cessation of use of substances. And then we have the option to add in an increased degree of self-awareness and self-compassion, an increase in pro-social, peer-related integration and interaction. There's a couple of more that we throw in that are, I don't want to say more important to us because it's all important to us. But the outcomes that we're going for are about, giving and receiving feedback, learning how to set boundaries, learning how to maintain boundaries, disidentifying with the emotional experience that we're aware of as it's happening, not discounting the emotional experience, but separating the awareness of that emotional experience with action steps that we choose to take as a result of that emotional experience. So being able to, we pause when agitated, being able to count to 10 with the awareness that I'm feeling upset or threatened or not being heard or validated, and being able to work towards articulating that to the two of you, as opposed to, changing my body posture and starting to elevate my tone and start talking a lot faster and just becoming aggressive because essentially I'm scared that I'm not safe, right? So those are the outcomes that we designed the program for, and we have found thus far to a fairly good percentage. I think we're probably averaging somewhere between 73 and 78% effectiveness as far as the county requested outcomes of reduction in truancy, reduction in substance use, reduction in court adjudication, court involvement, and our focal point as a program. And those are huge because, you go to juvie and that's a pivot in the direction of your life 100%, right? So being able to provide diversion programming where a young man or young woman are able to enroll in our program for 10 to 13 Saturdays. And if they complete the program satisfactorily, which is largely based on their ability to lean into, perhaps without much desire to, but lean into and practice some semblance of vulnerability and accountability, and take some ownership for the reasons that they're in our diversion program in the first place, as well as just overall attendance. I mean, it's a tall order asking a 16-year-old to show up for 13 Saturdays, let alone 13 Saturdays during the summer, which is one of the nicer times here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. So, and I talk to our team a lot about this, that, so-and-so just comes to the pickup spot with so much attitude, and they keep telling us how they're not engaged. And I was like, yeah, and they're showing up every Saturday. Right? And you don't get to, and this is an old axiom, and I think it's super applicable, particularly with the adolescents that we work with. I was like, it is such a gift and so rare. It is a unicorn that you would get to sit in the shade of the tree, right, that you're planting. And I would even take it a step further to say that with some of the high school kids that we're working with, simply by the very nature of, we'll work with you for 13 Saturdays for 6 hours at a time. And then there's 6.5 days when we're not working with you.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes what I've suggested and kind of introduced with curiosity to our team is like, maybe we're not even planting these seeds. Maybe all that we can do for this individual is till the soil so that the next person can come around and plant the seeds. Right. And can we get to a place, and I think we can, but this is for each of our team members and just individuals in interacting in a community. It's for anyone else's, thanks, Sue. It's for anyone else's decision to make, but can that be enough? And I think that's a really good question for us to ask ourselves. Why am I doing that? I got to keep an eye on my ego, right? I got to keep an eye on my motivations. So is it enough to know that I did the best I could, that I showed up 7, 8, 13 Saturdays in a row with unconditional positive regard to a couple of kids who maybe have never experienced that being modeled before? Maybe this is the first time that I said, yeah, we're gonna be at Carrier Park for pickup. We'll be in a big blue Transit all-wheel drive van. It's pretty rad. It's got a cool roof rack for when we bring gear, and the ladder to the top, and the tires are kind of badass. And we'll be there every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock waiting for you. And we'll be happy when you show up. Maybe the fact that every Saturday, 13 in a row, we're actually there at 10 o'clock consistently and on time. Maybe that's the first time some of our clients have ever experienced that. Maybe that's what we're modeling before we even get into the woods and talking about boundaries and self-regulation and how to calm myself down and all that stuff.
Matt, we do at retreats, one of our big things is stay on time. it may be the first time anybody's seen where anybody stayed on time and did what they said they were going to do. I love that.
Follow through is so huge. It's such
right. And we always say this too. It's not about the weekend. It's about what you're going to do after the weekend. It's, AA meetings are an hour a day. What about the other 23 hours? And if that meeting is your program, you're not in good shape, probably.
Yeah.
It's the fellowship that you're supporting, but you better have tools to be in the rest of the 23 hours, or you're going to be subject to these meetings the rest of your life, of which we do not prescribe. I'll get in trouble for saying that. Alicea, I just have so many questions.
Well, it's my turn. It's my turn.
Your turn. Yeah.
I imagine, and hear me when you were just talking, I imagine like a group of kids or adults, whatever, in the program. And then one person, like you said, like will get postured or something. And then do you say, "Oh, Sam, I see that you're postured. Let's talk about it." Or what do you do?
So, all of our team gets nonviolent communication and de-escalation training, because we don't put our hands on any of our clients. It is a little bit with juvenile justice because there's a bit of mandated participation as a result of the diversion program, and they're not, they still parent or guardians they have to respond to. They don't have to, but they are encouraged to respond to and follow suit with. But this is not a pre-contemplative program, right? This is not particularly our 6-week outpatient program. This is for individuals who are at an action or preparation stage as far as the stages of change. If there's bartering going on and you can do this, I'll do this program and not drink for the summer, but you better pay for my auto loan or whatever the heck. That's not who this program is for. This is for someone who maybe intellectually knows the right things to do or has their head wrapped around what the positive action steps might be, but doesn't have the experience of trying to put them into place. So when that happens, when there is posturing, we say more or less exactly what you just kind of theorized.
What do you feel?
Alicea, I can't help but notice, and maybe I'm off by this perception, but it seems to me that something I just said when I was running this next round of questions, I saw your posture shift a little bit. And I even saw you take a half step out of the circle, right? Because we circle up off the trail while we're doing these processing groups. I'm wondering if you feel comfortable in front of the whole group. Let me know, where that shift was for you and what that shift looked like. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, you don't even have to tell me right now. You can just kind of put your hand up real quick and maybe we could talk about it between now and the next one. And if you don't want to participate in this round, you don't have to participate in this round.
Okay. Another question in that same scenario, I was thinking of like the introverts in the group that are kind of more withdrawn, which would probably have been me. How do you not forget about them and not pay all your attention to the ones that are like,
So there's two questions there I hear. So how do we navigate group facilitation with more reserved participants and higher, more introverted participants? So I can give you an example with a group that we took out. Maybe it was a year ago. It might have been slightly longer. There was a 14-year-old. I'm pretty sure he was 14. He might have been 15, who was in our group. And this is during the pandemic when there were still mask protocols in our state. And we followed, because we're transporting clients and then going into the woods where we're fully permitted to operate. We followed ambulatory healthcare protocols. So everyone was double masked. We did temperature checks, hand sanitation before you got into the vehicle and when you left, and windows cracked. Essentially the same policies that ambulances used while we were still in that part of the response, the healthcare response to the pandemic. And this individual would keep, we noticed they would keep their mask on the hike, and very quiet, almost nonverbal. And we had some background information that let us know that that probably would be kind of a challenging process to get this particular kid to engage in dialogue. And we're like, well, we had a lot of conversations around it because we're like, well, this is a group dynamic interpersonal skill building program. It's going to be kind of tricky if there's no communication. So we had a couple of team meetings about it. And essentially what we did, we always try for the adolescent programs to always have at least one consistent facilitator all the way through for that cohort. So for those 10 to 13 weeks, there's some consistency. And if there's going to be overlap, there's a significant amount of overlap before it's just two new people that maybe you've only seen for the last half of it. In between the group facilitation, when we're just hiking, is a lot of opportunity for each of our team members to do a little walk and talk next to each of the participants individually. Someone kind of takes over the back 4 or 5 and the other person in the front kind of just checks in individually, because a lot of people don't like to talk in front of a group. Like I don't like the big meetings with 150 people, although I can hide in them better than the meetings with only 10 people. So as a result of those individual communications, and this is like super subjective to this particular client, one of our team members just built that individual rapport with this young man, right? And what we ended up doing, because we get releases of information to talk to clinicians if they have like a traditional therapist when they're not in the woods with us, and he had someone, I think, been working with someone for about 2 years, and we kind of all workshopped together this game plan that when we were in a circle, you sort of like, Alicea, like, would you like to go first for this question? And then, okay, Tom, like, I'm wondering how you feel about what we're talking about. And when we got to this particular young man, he just, I mean, you can't see because I'm sitting, but like he would, right at his hip, he would put his fist up if he wanted to participate, if he wanted to be called on next. And we would go in order. We wouldn't do popcorn. He knew when it was his turn. And we talked about this with him before we even got in the van. And if we saw the fist up, cool, how do you feel about what it is that we're talking about, kind of a thing. And if the fist was not up, we just went right to Tom. We skipped over him. And at no point, and I'm not sure why, I think it is due to the ability of our team members to build rapport, because they make eye contact and because they show up week after week after week for these kids. And even when they're being snotty little punk kids, hey, you know what, Alicea, thank you so much for coming out this week. I know this is not your favorite thing to do this Saturday, and I appreciate that even though that's challenging for you, you got out of bed a little earlier than you probably wanted to, and you showed up. And that's great. And I appreciate you. And I hope you have a great week. And after doing that week after week after week, for whatever reason, and I think it's because of that, no one else in that group was like, hey, that's bullshit. That's not fair. How come so-and-so doesn't have to participate? It never came up. And when it does come up that there's a little opposition around it, if you don't want to participate in this round, I'd love to know why. And we can talk about it a little more afterwards privately. But we're focusing on interpersonal skill building, right? So like, I wonder what it is about so-and-so not participating that's making you so upset. Kind of just reframe it, redirect. And it's all about curiosity. It's not about being angry. It's not about opposition. It's just curiosity. That's the whole thing that this entire program is anchored on. I went to a class out in Boulder, Colorado. It was a year-long program, Earth-Based Institute, nature-connected coaching. And it's a curriculum that's anchored in the Apache lineage of their scouts, and it was anchored on 3 sacred questions, and I will never forget these. I mean, this is all about meaning making, right? Everything we're talking about, no matter what book it's coming from, is about meaning making. And the 3 questions are: what are you noticing? What does that mean to you? And what is that teaching you? And when I first heard those from this program, I'd come back and I'd run a group. I don't really run the groups anymore, to be honest. I have people who are phenomenal facilitators doing it now, but I'd come back and I'd be like sheepish and like, all right, they're called the sacred questions. And I know that's kind of a lame name for the sacred questions, but like that's what they were called. And I'm just repeating what they were called. And then I'd get frustrated that people wouldn't take it seriously. And it occurred to me probably 4 months after, like, into doing that I was doing that. So like the next day I'd pick up a group, we'd circle up at the trailhead, and I'd be like, listen, this is sacred space. The next 6 hours together on this trail, we are on hallowed ground every step of the way. When we step off the trail and we circle up and we have a conversation, there is honesty, there is trust, There's vulnerability, and it's going to be challenging. But this is a sacred experience. If nothing else, allow this to be the next 4 to 6 hours to be the only perfectly safe, content experience of your week. That's what I'm going to put into the intentions of the next couple of hours. And when we stop, I'm going to ask you 3 sacred questions. And those questions are, and I owned it. I owned the reverence of those questions for self-reflection. And those questions are,
Here they come.
what are you noticing? What does that mean to you? And what is that teaching you? And when I can present those questions and be patient with the response, because that's not the way that my brain processes and how I've learned or taught myself or been modeled of how to engage in a conversation with someone. But if we're talking about meaning making, talking about making things significant to ourselves and assigning worth to them, then let's be intentional about that process. So when that happens, I kind of veered a little bit off track there, but when there is someone who doesn't want to engage, we can honor that and we can introduce curiosity as to the why behind not wanting to engage. And then we can workshop if there's another access point. I mean, it's the same reason we don't just hike, but go paddleboarding. Someone won't say a darn thing on 3 outings hiking, but we'll put them on a mountain bike and they won't shut up. Because they're like, that's where they feel safe and they feel like they can thrive, and therefore there's confidence, and therefore they can express the trust that hopefully we've cultivated.
We're out of time. I wanted to get into the modalities and why you did it. And so that was funny. You dovetailed right in. You're clearly going to have to come back again. I read something this morning that goes by the questions, is this whole idea of what are you hearing or noticing? What does it mean to you? And then what's it teaching you? There's this idea that there are things that are real to people, but they aren't true. I don't know if that makes sense. There's real that not true, but most true things are real. So what people are hearing and then what it means to them can be very real to them, but it might not be true. So it's guiding their life.
Stories we tell ourselves, right?
Well, yeah.
Stories or false narratives or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And if we revisit core values, then we can overlap those truths with, okay, but is that who I'm trying to be as a human being?
Right.
And if there's discord there, then like, cool, let's take a look at that.
Right. And we pivot.
It's almost like I knew what I was doing when I named it.
Mic drop. Well, Matt, we touched on just so many things, and I have so many things so much crosses over with what we're trying to do. We'd use it in the format of the 12 steps as the founders did it, which is somewhat different than what the book says, because we also know what they were doing before the book was written. And it's a little bit different than the way the book was written. And so we follow that path when we teach people the STEP program, the one things that Dr. Bob and them did before they wrote the book. And some of that didn't make it in the book. And some stuff made it in the book that they weren't doing. And that's a big controversy. I'll get in all sorts of trouble for that too sometimes. But we know some success for those that this works for. It works. And I love this idea. The stuff that you're doing can unlock somebody. Absolutely. Like some of the stuff we're doing unlock somebody. Would you be willing to come back and continue the conversation, Matt?
Oh, sure. Yeah, happy to.
It'd be great. I'd love to start when we do this, to start on the modalities and why under one condition everybody talks and under another condition they don't. I am exactly that way. I am not comfortable some places and comfortable some places. And I am not going certain places somewhere and I am in other. And I'm figuring out why I do that. But I think everyone has to figure it out and then figure out why is it on the bike I'll talk and I won't on the paddleboard.
Yeah.
What am I, what it's changing that in me. And I also love, Alicea and I talk about this. You called challenging things. Instead of saying this is going to be, what do we say? Hard work and painful. I say it's going to take effort and you might be uncomfortable. And people will lean into that. Are you okay with putting some effort in and it might be uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Sure. But you tell somebody it's going to be hard work. It's going to be painful.
I would still go, but
I'm done. Yeah, but like word choice is so powerful. Like even if I say like I've got a problem If it's a problem, then it's my problem and it's me versus the problem. If I say I have a challenge, then I'm already thinking like, well, how can we approach this challenge? I'm already bringing other people into it, and it becomes, and that's why the hiking works so great, because I'm not like eye contact and right at you. It's two of us shoulder to shoulder going that way. So it's fun. I mean, I also was an English major, so I get to play with the syntax and the word choice a lot. I can geek out on that too.
Yeah, I don't think we could pick up that you were an English major. I'm being facetious. I picked it up. Great vocabulary he has. Makes me want to go read the dictionary. Thanks, Matt. Well, Matt, I feel like I'm going to have conversations with you offline because there's some connection and crossover, and I'd love to support your organization. We'd love to, as part of what we do, make sure our people know about what you do, so they can go and do that as a support. And maybe some of the things that we do, you would send some people that come to do what you do and say, go see what these guys are doing.
I think if and when, again, like we are open to pretty much everybody. We're about, as you said before we got on the call, like this is about healing, this is about growth, this is about self-awareness. And when that aligns with my understanding of what y'all are doing, like that's where they're going.
Perfect. All right. Any last words, Alicea?
No, I think that was great. Look forward to our next conversation with you. I'm sure Sarah will get a hold of you and we'll schedule in the future.
So let's get that on the book sooner than later, Cass, because I think it's really important. We're getting a lot of feedback from people, and we'll get a lot more feedback when it comes in. It's a very inclusive conversation, Matt, and we're really trying to have that in the world, is to bring everybody to the table and tell us your issue, because we can't fix anybody, or not fix anybody. We can't help anybody to their healing if they won't talk about it and at least show up.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get them. Thanks again for coming. And,
it's fun. I appreciate you.
Yep. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon right here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific, and 6 o'clock over in the UK for Recovery Live. Oh, we have a new background for closing. Look at that, Alicea. You see the red brick, orange bricks?
Bricks.
Cass. That's a Cass thing for sure.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.